When you began your study of art, were you shocked by the number of paintings that dealt with the naked human body, with sex, passion, the carnal side of human nature?
It would never have entered my mind to be shocked. I can't think
Well,
why
you're
one
Catholic.
should be. Yes, but Catholics believe in God, you know.
Well, I know that, but
So
American Catholics have also, for a long time, been very, shall I say, wary of public displays of...
Well, obviously, there must be something appropriate. I mean, I would be distressed if I was to see somebody sort of naked walking down the street. I would think it was inappropriate behavior. I wouldn't be shocked. I would feel compassionate towards the poor person. But when you're telling a story in which often the point depends upon nakedness, or one of the great myths where part of being a goddess you can afford to be naked and unashamed, this is very appropriate. And the artists do this with great reverence and delight.
Well, there is a serious point here in the sense that you talk on camera before millions of people so unself-consciously of nudity and carnality and passion, all in the art that you observe, that one of your critics, Germaine Greer again, scoffs at the notion that a consecrated virgin can talk to us about these things.
Well, see, why does she think that anybody should not delight in the creative work of God? I mean, it's to me, it's very illogical. God made the body. And this suggests that sort of God made mistakes about certain parts of the body. You know, that unfortunately, he's done these shameful things. We must do our best to cover them up. This is not the faith. The faith is that God looked at his creation and thought it was good, thought it was beautiful. We're made in the image of God. And there's nothing amiss in any part of the human body. But again, it should be appropriate. There's, to me, something far more salacious about these sort of sniggers and criticisms than in just a Christian delight in God's skill.
But you have to, surely you understand. I mean, you are a very sophisticated woman. Well, I mean, for example, what would the nuns in your convent think if they heard you discussing the naked little slave girl in the tomb of Ramesses in one of the series, or where you compare the breast of the matron to the firm little apples of everybody else?
Well, they will see it because the BBC will bring down a television screen and show it to them.
Well, what will they think?
They'll think as I think, that this is quite a good description of the bodies we're looking at. None of the sisters has ever raised an eyebrow at anything I've said or written, because they're not cramped by this false idea that sexuality is something wrong. It's something we have sacrificed. The vow of chastity doesn't mean you just don't get married. It means that sexuality is something you give to God because you want to be free for something else. It's a wonderful gift. And I delight that people have it, though it's not a gift for me.
There's a moment you're talking about
Oh, the Angre, yes.
The bather of Valpincon. The back and light plays upon this whole beautiful body from the long neck right down to the cleave of the buttocks, as though he sort of licked his paint.
Yes.
Adoringly over every part of her. And to me, it's a wonderful paradox that this great classic painter, the virtuous Ingres, should be one painter who so celebrates the beauty of the human body. I mean, that's a very sensuous, almost erotic moment.
Yes. But you see, he was the great classicist, and yet he's the most sensual of painters. Wonderful. In fact, I didn't want to do that painting. I wanted to do one of his great portraits, Madame, is it La Morticier? One of those great icons of a female. And the director was very keen that I should do this one. And I can remember in the Louvre looking at it, and suddenly I realized what made it so great. You know, he loved the back always, Ang. It was his big thing. That isn't the only back that he savours. And often he makes them much longer than they are because he can't have enough of the back, so he added on more vertebrae. So they're wrong physically, but they're wonderful visually. And that's marvelous. It's a highly charged painting. It's vibrant with the sense of what it means to have a body.
And it's a spiritual
yes,
painting.
Because God gave the body, didn't he? God made the back. Angus just improved on it by giving it a few more vertebrae.
In one of your films from an earlier series, The Grand Tour, you say of Botticelli's Birth of Venus that our world is not strong enough to receive beauty naked. And when Venus steps into the world, we shall cover her up. In fact, as we did with Adam and Eve, right? And then you go on to say, you talk about the beautiful male nakedness of Adam and the sexuality of Eve and their immersion in the truth. What is that truth?
The truth of what it means to be human, which is a very difficult truth.
And how so?
Because to be human means we have to be open all the time to experience, to receive it, to grow by it, to use it. One of the things that I most hope when I die is God won't say, well, I sent you a lot of experiences and you just lived through them, you didn't use them. Which is the easy thing to do, just to endure them, to let them pass, to suffer or to enjoy, but not to have used them, to have grown by them. It's demanding to be human.
I would have thought, you see, in the context of Adam and Eve, that the truth you were talking about had to do with sex and desire, nakedness and pleasure, and the guilt we have come to feel over the passions of the body, and that this truth is what, in one sense, drove them out of the garden.
No, I wasn't thinking along those lines, though I suppose part of that could be encapsulated in what it means to be human.
Right.
But I don't think being truly human has any place for guilt, which I think is a no-no.
You don't?
No. Contrition, yes. Guilt, no.
And the difference is?
Contrition means you tell God you are sorry and you're not going to do it again, and you start off afresh. All the damage you've done to yourself put right. Guilt means you go on and on, belabor it and having emotions and beating your breast and being ego-fixated. Guilt is a trap. People love guilt because they feel if they suffer enough guilt, they'll make up for what they've done. Whereas, in fact, they're just sitting in a puddle and splashing. Contrition, you move forward. It's over. You are willing to forgo the pleasures of guilt.
I hope this is not an offensive question, but I am genuinely curious. Do you ever wonder about sex, about the mystery and pleasure of it?
No, but I think this is because I'm a rather cold person. I think there's some sisters who do very much feel the sacrifice they've made. But for me, this has always been a closed book. In fact, I remember when I was about 13, my mother, who was a very prim and proper lady, said to me, I think the time has come, Wendy, when I should tell you the facts of life. And I said, oh no, Mummy, I'm going to be a nun. I'll never need to know. And I wasn't in the least interested. It wasn't until I was a nun and realized I had to teach girls, I thought I'd better find out how it actually works. And I was given a disgusting book which explained the mechanism, but it was all hedged round with possibilities of sin, and I knew that couldn't be right. Absolutely, God didn't do things like that. Give you a toy and say, don't play with it. So that I took in the physics of it, but knew it was a great gift from God, and I was delighted other people had it, but I was happy with the gifts I had.
It wasn't a gift on your tree?
No, and I didn't want it. I really have never wanted it. Because I've got a bigger gift.
Which is?
To be allowed to live in solitude with God, to have been a nun all my life. To me, that's a bigger gift.
I understand that because I think, at least I thought, I began to get close to you watching the series. In one of my favorite moments in the third episode, where you're describing Botticelli's Mars and Venus.
Yes.
And you say, Mars is almost sort of brutish, but Venus, for all that brave little smile, don't you think there's just an element of a woman facing loneliness? Mightn't many a Renaissance woman looked at this and felt this was just a woman's life? And I thought maybe that's the key to Sister Wendy Beckett, that a woman's life is loneliness and she feels it's her calling.
Well, I would hate to destroy any sense of closeness that we had felt, dear Bill, but I was really thinking of Renaissance marriages and how they were not the marriages of two friends, as one would hope they are today. They were people often who didn't know one another, forced together because of financial considerations to produce an heir. And so perhaps the woman was living a very isolated, emotional life, whereas today I would hope that wouldn't be. But you are quite right in that I do think we all are alone and that we have responsibility and that nobody can live our lives for us. It's something I'm deeply aware of, and I don't think it's just me, I think it's all of us, and we mustn't pretend that anyone can ever share everything on a profound level. I think men and women live alone, but they often have the comfort of a close friend to share their life.
You seem to have such great sympathy for the prostitute in Monet's Olympia. You say she's so in command, she's so self-assured, and she's so vulnerable. Why is she so vulnerable?
Well, she's naked to begin with.
Like the young man standing.
Yes. But she's spread out flat. She's there to be used, which is what a prostitute is. Somebody who, for a sum of money, gives their bodies for use, which is a tragic thing to happen. She feels that she is in control because she chooses to do this. She'd rather have the money than have her body inviolate. But this is something she's not aware of in its full context of how we look at her and feel compassion. She thinks, proud little creature, that she's dominating the men. She's unaware of the full complexity of the situation.
But we swing to the other side, and there is perhaps the most famous woman in all of art history, Mona Lisa, the merchant's wife. And you say she is keeping herself a mystery. And you go on to mention the eternal mystery of woman. What is that mystery?
Well, it's a mystery to man, you see, just as man is a mystery to woman.
But I didn't need you to tell me that.
But it works
I want you to tell me what the mystery is.
It works both ways. Well, the essence of a mystery is that you can't tell it. And it's particularly, I think, true of Leonardo, because as a homosexual, he hadn't got the physical key to the mystery. I would imagine that when there is sexual union between man and woman, each is tasting the mystery of the other. And in that mystery, that sharing of a mystery, entering into a world of ecstatic experience. Well, you see, beautiful Leonardo didn't know anything about women. And I think that's really what she's smiling at. Here is this beautiful man who hasn't a clue as to what she's like. And he's painting away with great artistry and skill and self-confidence. And he will never get any further than her little smile. In fact, I think that is the secret of Mona Lisa's smile. It's the It's the nearness of Leonardo, the man who will never understand.
These exchanges in great art between the abyss and the bliss, between the pastoral beauty of some art and the terrible, frightening revelations of life in other art, do they keep you off balance in a way? Just as you think you've experienced this sublime, you turn and there's Picasso's prostitutes.
Well, this is one of the wonderful things, you see. Art will never let you be supine. It keeps you on your spiritual toes, because you'll be challenged from all directions. Once you think you've got it fixed, art's coming from that direction, lo and behold, it's coming from behind you and another artist. So you're always open, searching, alive, and this is the most wonderful thing that can happen to us, to be saved from zombiedom.
I love the beginning of your series where you talk about the prehistoric people who are our small, hairy ancestors, and you say they were in all ways like us. How so? We don't think of them as like us.
No, but when you see the cave paintings, you know.
You were really taken with those.
Oh, I was overwhelmed by them. I had a wonderful experience there because usually I do the piece in one. And
one take.
Yes. And
one take Beckett, they call you.
Well, if we do a second, it's because they often want it from another angle. Not always, but often. But I was so moved by the caves that the first two weren't right. I did 2 takes. And then in the third one, suddenly I found the words. And I spoke in a sort of rapture of discovery and certainty. And when I'd finished, the crew all applauded me. Now that's never happened to me before, and it was such a wonderful thing that they too had been caught up. They weren't really applauding me, they were applauding what they had seen. Because you see, as I say, art starts at the top. We've painted differently, but never greater than the art of the caves.
And you see this as sacred art.
Yes, it comes across as sacred.
These prehistoric people needed no art appreciation course. They needed no lessons in prayer.
No, this was prayer. This was something that was coming from a very deep desire for more than life was giving them.
My friend Joseph Campbell, among others, thought it was that these primitive people, art showed them a way to God, and that this was the visual form of prayer. Do you think that's so?
Yes, I'm sure it is so, and that's why it's so impressive. I suppose in a way all great art is a visual form of prayer, though the artists may not know it, but I think the cave artists did know it.
When this series has ended, will you be back in solitude?
I'll retreat with the greatest joy.
What does become clear to me listening to you is that in solitude, you are never alone.
No. That's the point of it. You're there to be with God. That's why solitude is not loneliness. Loneliness is needy. It wants. Solitude is fulfillment. It has.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.